Right.
And we're going live. I think we're live now. Hi, everyone. It's Tessa Linden. I'm joined today by Jenna Rawlings of Beautiful Inspirations Photography. Jenna is going to be teaching a course on mastering the fundamentals of Photoshop, which I think is an amazing course, especially for people who might not be familiar with editing. Jenna, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started in photography.
So I used to be in healthcare, and several years ago I decided I needed a pretty big shift, and so I decided to kind of look at something that was the complete opposite of healthcare, and so I kind of started looking at the arts. Photography is something that I've always kind of had an enjoyment for, a passion for. I feel like that's something that everyone says, oh, I've loved photography since I was a kid. But it's true, you know, I've always been the family photographer, even when I was a little kid, and just had my little, you know, tiny little 35 millimeter. And so when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life when I was in my mid-20s and having no idea where to go, I tried to look at what's brought me the most joy, and that was photography. And so that's kind of, I just went with that. And when I first started, I had no idea what genre of photography I would end up in. At first, I thought I was going to do only natural light as I sit in my studio light studio. And then discovered that obviously studio light is much more predictable, and we live in Canada, so natural light was kind of nixed pretty quickly for me. But yeah, so I started off thinking I was just going to be a family photographer, and then quickly realized that you can't really make a living off of just doing families. And then my niece was born, my very first niece, and my brother asked if I would take pictures of her, and I told him, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I can try. Yeah, that's fine. And so now those newborn images of my niece that I look back at, I cringe a little bit at, and but they're still really special. They're the first newborn photos I ever did, and being my niece, that was really kind of a special way to start into my journey with newborns.
Yeah, and I think we all start somewhere. And I know, Jenna, that you have been somebody who has, throughout your career, dedicated yourself to learning and elevating your craft. So I'm sure you did great, but look where you are now. Look at those beautiful images behind you. You do absolutely gorgeous work. On a personal note, when I decided to transition out of newborns, I referred my clients to you. I don't know how many came to you, but I hope some.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Which is just to say that I really do believe in the work that you do, your work ethic, especially right now, the safety precautions that you've put in place in your studio. And I have great admiration for what you're doing. So bravo, Jenna. Because so you're going to be teaching Mastering the Fundamentals of Photoshop.
Yeah.
Can you give us an overview of those fundamentals and what's going to be taught in each segment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to eventually be offering 8 total courses. For the first release, and I think it's going to be quite soon in April, there's just going to be 4 episodes. And it's the first 4 episodes are really for those who are brand new to Photoshop, or brand new to photography, or both. And it is truly kind of a very basic course. But I think that even those who are experienced with Photoshop could learn something from it, because I'm going to be going over processing of raw images in Adobe Camera Raw. So if you're someone who uses primarily Lightroom but have been wanting to switch over to Camera Raw, this would be a really great beginner for you. A lot of the things that happen in Camera Raw are the exact same things that happen in Lightroom, just in a little bit of a different way. So it's kind of a good episode to watch if you're wanting to switch over to Camera Raw. I'm just looking at my notes to try and remember what my episodes are. Then we're going to do an introduction to the layers panel. So all those different layer adjustments. And there are a million and different ways to use basically every single adjustment. So we're going to kind of go over the basic way to use each one. So whether curves, levels, all of those things, and what they do. The nice thing about the episodes, I think that because we're keeping them to 10 to 15 minutes, it's not like it's going to be information overload. It's going to be just the right amount of information to get you started and get you to kind of look into how you can use the adjustments on your own in different ways as well. So I think it's kind of a really great start to learn how to use each one and then further your education kind of on your own. And later on, the other 4 episodes that I'll be doing at another release date are going to go in a little bit more in depth and get a little bit more advanced. So we're going to definitely look at a more advanced way to use each of the adjustment layers as well. And then the other 2 episodes are going to focus on ways to ensure that your images are print ready when you are saving them out of Photoshop. So one is going to be fixing banding. So we all know how horrible gray seamless paper is. Seamless paper in general.
Great fat gray paint, same thing.
Yeah, so fixing banding, there's a couple different ways to do it. I'm going to go over one that I find to be the easiest. I'm also going to create an action for anyone who signs up for my course, and they'll be able to also get that banding action when they come to my course. So I'm going to teach you how to do it so you can do it yourself, but then I'm also going to give you an action to kind of do it yourself. Do it kind of really easily as well. And then later on, I will also teach how to record your own actions. And then the last thing we're going to look at is just sharpening for both print and web, because it needs to be done a little bit differently. So both sharpening and saving, because you want to save them in different file formats. So those are kind of things we're going to look at, saving and sharpening, so that when you're bringing your images into Photoshop, the images that you're exporting and saving out of Photoshop are going to be consistent, and you're going to know that they're the best quality every single time.
Consistency is one thing I wanted to ask you about, because I think even seasoned photographers can struggle with consistency in their editing. Is this something that your classes are going to help your students overcome?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of people go into because Photoshop is this monstrous program. I could tell you to probably know a tenth of the program myself, even though I'm very proficient in Photoshop. There's a million things that I'm probably never going to use in the program. And I think a lot of people go into using Photoshop thinking they need to know everything. And that's actually I think detrimental to thinking that you need to know all the things of Photoshop. And so I think that my course is really going to help people know everything they're going to absolutely need, and just kind of do away with the things that aren't totally necessary, at least for our genre of photography. You know, my videos will be focusing on studio editing for newborns, but very transferable to anything you do in studio. And some of the stuff I'm going to teach you will also be transferable to outdoor shooting. You know, the banding, the saving and printing, saving and sharpening for web and print.
For sure, yeah.
So I think that especially once you know, I go into this more in my videos, but for me, when I'm processing out my raw files in ACR, I do it the exact same way every single time. And so just that processing of the raw files in the exact same way every time ensures that my images are going to look the same from session to session and image to image in sessions as well.
Yep. That's awesome, because I think that is something that at any point in your career, especially if you're switching it up. So maybe you've gone from outdoors to indoors or because seasons, whatever. Or you do newborns, but then you also do other things. So I think that's awesome that people are going to have some real tangibles to walk away with in this one. What's one thing you wish you knew about photography or even Photoshop earlier in your career?
Photography, don't buy everything. If I looked at some of the stuff that I bought 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it was stuff that I would never touch. You can see my studio is neutrals. That's all I shoot now.
Yeah.
But early in my journey with photography, I just looked at all the things. I'm like, oh, it's cute, I'll buy that. Oh, it's cute, I'll buy that. And even not just props, but gear too. Like, it's just not necessary. We don't, you know, I really love the trend that I'm seeing with a lot of DIY. I'm seeing a big shift of, you know, different posing systems that aren't necessarily these $1,000 posing systems.
Right.
But yeah, definitely just don't buy everything, especially when you're brand new, because that was my biggest mistake. Is I bought so many props when I was first starting out, and within a couple months of figuring out what my style was, I didn't buy anything that I bought, and then I ended up with thousands of dollars worth of stuff that I hated and that nobody else wanted either, because I didn't realize that it wasn't very attractive stuff.
You know what? I think we've all been there, Jenna. Don't worry. But I think it's true that there's a process to finding your style, right? Yeah. And some of it can be certainly going out and buying things, trying them and seeing what you like and what you don't like. I actually also think that when you're editing, that's another big opportunity to discover your style, because you sort of get to see what works with what you're creating in your images and what doesn't, and then you can decide which directions to move in. So no shame on those of us that took a little longer to get there than the others when it came to defining our style, because I am certainly one of those people. I've been doing this for 12 years and I feel like I finally hit my groove. So
I think I'm in the beginning of my 5th year in business, or 4th year. I don't even know anymore. And I'm at a point now where I can say that I know what my style is and I know what my brand is. But it did. It took me 4 years to get there, and I don't mind that it took me 4 years, because now I've ended up with a brand and a style that's, I know that a lot of people look at my work and go, "Oh, that's Jenna's." And
yeah,
that's exactly what I think we should all strive for, is for someone to look at our work and go, "Oh, I know exactly whose that is."
yeah, yeah,
And I think in terms of Photoshop, I think I mentioned it a little bit before, just that you don't need to know everything, you know,
yeah,
and that there's a million, there's a ton of different ways to do the exact same thing, and none of them are wrong. If it gets you where you want to be with your image and it's non-destructive, it doesn't matter how you get there. And I think that I got so caught up, there's so many different educators out there who teach Photoshop courses, and they all say that their way is the right way. And I think the only right way is the way that works for you. And I had to learn that just because, you know, one photography educator out there says that curves is the only way to properly expose and images, it doesn't mean that that's right. And so, I started off only using curves, and now I use levels much more than I use curves. And
mhm,
also, I think that it's okay to change your style. Like, just because you start one way doesn't mean that you have to stick with that forever. I was applying for a newborn pose accreditation, and I was getting some feedback on my images, and they're like, "Well, there's not a lot of contrast in them." And up until that point, I really edited with very little contrast,
yeah.
but I edited I add some contrast for my submission for accreditation. And ever since then, I'm all about the contrast and I love it.
Embracing new things. But I think that what you said about you don't have to know all of Photoshop is so liberating, actually. It's
Yeah.
kind of freeing. It takes like a bit of a weight off your shoulders when you're looking at this monster and all these drop down menus and all of the different things. And I mean, for fun now, I'll watch like a random YouTube video and just learn whatever. I don't know. I don't apply it in my work. I just do it for my personal stuff. But it's still like 12 years later, I'm like, oh, look at this thing I've never, ever, ever touched. And it's never been a detriment to everything else that I've done. So definitely like Photoshop has a place for everything, but you don't have to know it all. So I think that's encouraging actually for people to know that it's not a monster that needs to be conquered. It's a few things that you can learn to really help you gain consistency, um, just process your images, and probably as well your workflow, your editing workflow.
Yeah. And I think
Uh,
trying to learn all of Photoshop is going to improve your consistency. Because if you know 12 different ways to do the exact same thing and you're doing it the different way each time, you're not going to end up with very consistent images. But if you only ever use levels for your exposure adjustments, you're pretty much guaranteed that your exposure adjustments are going to be consistent.
yeah, yeah. Um, what's something that excites you about the industry right now?
We were talking before, and I said it's a little hard to be excited about the industry right now. It's scary times, but I think the thing that I love most of it, there's a couple things. One is just that it's I'm in control, and so I love that I can be creative as I want. I've gotten to a place with my business where my clients just trust me. I know some photographers send out questionnaires about what colors you want. Well, I mean, that's not applicable with me because I don't use color. Um, but I don't even send out questionnaires. I just create sets. My clients come in and they love the sets every time. And it's really exciting to me that my clients come in and love what I do, and I don't have to send out questionnaires because I know that whatever I create, they're going to really love.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also, I think just the opportunity to constantly be learning. I think when you're in a desk job, a 9 to 5, sure, you might get to learn some new HR stuff, but how exciting is that? Whereas in a field like photography, where there's constantly, new gear. I know right now the big thing is mirrorless, and everyone is learning mirrorless, and everyone's switching to mirrorless. And I think that's the really cool part about our industry, is that there is always something new to learn that's not just new and boring like HR, but new and exciting. The new gear advancements, when some new prop trend comes out.
Yeah.
I do not go with the trends very much, but I still find it really cool to kind of see what people are doing. And then even though we're all self-employed, most of us just work independently on our own. We might have an assistant, but most of us are just on our own. We still have been able to form this community of photographers from all over the world. And this shared passion seems to have brought us together. I know there's sometimes some divide in, when people decide to bring up controversial topics, but I think that overall, if you look at the fact that there are millions of us from all over the world, and yet we all seem to understand each other at least a little bit. I think it's a really cool thing to look at.
That's awesome, Jenna. I like that. I like the bringing together of people. And in what I do with APNPI, I'm lucky that I get to talk to people from everywhere right now. And it's really cool that you're absolutely right. We do have this shared common, this thread that in an understanding because of what we do. So I like that answer. Very sweet. What's something last question of the day, what do you hope that students taking your course are going to walk away with?
The whole goal of my course is to make people's editing faster and easier. So by knowing how to process out raw images, my images that come out of camera raw are basically done. And anything more that I do in Photoshop is either retouching, skin retouching, or a little bit of artistic enhancements. So everything that I teach in my courses has a goal of making people's editing process easier and faster and more consistent. Which of course makes us money, right? The faster we can get things done, the less time it takes, the more money we make at the end of the day. So really, it's about profit too.
All very good things to be mindful of when you're working with images, because I know there can be a huge temptation to spend a lot of time. And I remember when I transitioned I know that there's actions now, but like there were actions back in the day.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And you would be like, oh, did I do enough? And that freeing of like, oh my God, I'm done. Once I learned to just do it myself, I was like, it was a very big an eye opener. Like, oh, so okay, I don't need to do 5,000 things to this one image. It's done. Oh my goodness. So I love the time saving, because I think we've all been there. And consistency, I think, is again such a huge piece to developing your skill as a photographer and your brand. And what your clients will come to you for, as you said, and that now you're at a level where they just trust you implicitly. So you don't need to worry about all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Come to you, you get to do your thing. And that just makes it freeing for you and also your client, because they don't have to think too much about it either, right? They've got a million other things when they have a newborn to think on. So
exactly. And that's part of the reason I first nixed out questionnaires. Now, I only ever did one for maybe a year. I took it out because new parents of brand new babies, they don't want to sit on their computer and fill out a questionnaire. They want to know that they can come into the studio and get beautiful portraits without them having to tell you how to do your job. I totally get if you're someone who uses a lot of color. Obviously, you want to ask them, what color are you using in the nursery?
Yes. Yeah.
But I would never ask a parent, what poses do you want from me?
They're going to get what they get, and they're not going to get upset.
Yeah, I don't send prep guides. I don't send questionnaires. We talk on the phone. I let them know what they need to know in about a 5-minute conversation.
Yeah.
And then they just show up, and they show up stress-free, relaxed, and we just have a good time.
Awesome. I think that people are going to show up to your class that very same way, because I think that this sounds like something that's been laid out so thoughtfully and with a real goal in mind, and then a tangible that people are going to walk away from. So absolutely something that's worthwhile, certainly for newborns, but even more experienced photographers. I have no doubt that they're going to be able to learn something from your classes. It's been a very pleasure speaking with you this morning, Jenna.
Thank you.
And I look forward to it. So again, coming up on the APNPI Academy is Jenna's Mastering the Fundamentals of Photoshop class. So hope to see you all there. Have a great day, Jenna. It's been great talking with you.